I was born into a family to be child sex trafficked. For the first 16 years of my life, I was abused and passed around to my father, his family, his extended family, and then leased out to gangs, to Freemasons, and to other groups. He got paid a lot of money for this, and the worst part for me was my mother did nothing to protect me, and my grandmother, his mother, trained me in how to be the best slave possible. At that stage, I was 5 years old. It was a very lonely and terrifying day in my father's home because there was no love really for me. He was what I would call a psychopath. The only kindness or effort he made towards me was if I was going to perform or if I performed well for the people he was leasing me to and trafficking me to. My mother she's what we call a narcissist. So I only mattered to her or got attention from her if I provided something for her that she wanted. The first signs I knew that they were training me up for something other than men coming to the home was that my grandmother and my father had a conversation where he told her I was ready to be trained. What he meant was ready to be trained to be a slave. My father made a great deal of money out of me over the years, and my grandmother got paid commission. I was leased out of a nightclub in our red light district in Auckland, and that was from the age of 11. I featured in well over 100 child abuse materials, whether it was photographs taken or movies made. The first 3 to 4 years of life, my father would have his extended family involved. I remember being made to sit on one uncle's knee and he would grope me and touch me inappropriately and abuse me in front of family watching, and they would laugh. My father me when I was 4. It's almost like being up on the ceiling looking down. I remember the indescribable pain and the fear and not understanding child trafficking. Yes, it happens with kids being snatched. Most of child trafficking will happen from people who know the child. So I think we have to not glorify this and think it's just children being snatched. It happens in our country. Children are trafficked everywhere from people who know them and potentially family members. The thing with child trafficking is we have to stop imagining it's unknown and it's a distance from us. This is in our homes, this is in our families, this is in people well known to our families. My father wasn't just a predator and a pedophile, but he was also a deranged psychopath. He would try to run me over in the car as a punishment. He would pump me full of so that I was more malleable. They didn't want to waste good money on a traumatized and scared child. I think the ritual for me was really about being dressed up and made to look nice and made to smell nice and made to be a young child who was highly. Over time, as I grew a bit older, I would just be roughly pulled out of bed by one arm and thrown into the back of my father's van and then taken somewhere. Other sorts of trafficking would involve me being at the nightclub where I was trafficked from, but having to perform and on the stage where the movies would be made, I was made to dress up in adult female clothing. They were trying to make me look like a worker. The car that drove up it was black and it had flags on either side of the windows in the front. And out of the car were three men. But I now know that two of them were bodyguards. When I went to school, because it was my only safe place, no one abused me at school, I felt as though I compartmentalized because I was just out of control. And at school, I could steal other kids' lunches and eat. I was always excited to be at school. I know that they found me very challenging and I understand why, but every part of me was screaming for someone to rescue me. When I was 11 years old, my parents told me they were separating and my mother was leaving. I got left with my father when I lived with my father because my brother was with him in the house and me. And that meant I was humiliated. I was punched, I was kicked. They would do things like my father would strip me naked, make me be on all fours on the floor, put a dog collar around my neck, and lead me around the house. I wasn't allowed to eat like a person. I had to either eat off the floor, not using hands, because they saw me as a dog. I think what happened was part of the agreement between my parents was that I could see my mother every second weekend. I would just cling to her. I would cry. I would beg. I would hide. She just wouldn't listen to me. So I got sent back. My brother was conditioned. I don't think he was abused. He became my father's mini me when I was living in that house with them. He was never kind to me. He tried to drown me many times. He would tie me up. He would beat me up. When I was 11, he was 15 and a half. I was exhausted. When I was away from there and at my mother's house, I would be sleeping the sleep of the dead if I wasn't following her around like a little puppy. The club that I went to had was in it. They were very kind to me. And people comment that, really, were they? Why didn't they help you? They did what they could, but they were also being abused as well. The nightclub I was leased out of was full of patrons and people who wanted to have a few drinks and watch a strip show. Obviously, was available on offer. There were enough people that knew about it that knew I was there, and I was upstairs in a room hidden away on the top floor. My father was always happy if he made good money out of me. He wanted notoriety. I think that, as well as earning some good money, made him happy. I was just something that could deliver to him. I was an object. The kindest I ever saw my father was sometimes he might give me $1 because he'd made so much money. I was 16 years old when I never had to see my father through the court system legally ever again. He tried very hard and he would try and bully me and bribe me to go and see him and go and spend time with him, but I wouldn't. I didn't see him willingly ever again. It was an agreement my parents had that when I turned 16, I could decide where I would live and who I would see at 16, that was deemed the age I could decide. The day I turned 16 was without doubt the best day of my life because I never had to see him again. I lived with my mother until I was 17 and then I left home. It wasn't until I became a parent myself that the memories really started hitting me. I spent the next several years trying to recover from and deal with the trauma of it. Luckily, I've been able to work my way through it and wrote my memoir 2 years ago that was published. And that's where my story lies. So I've moved on, which is great. The big thing about child trafficking that people don't understand is that it is bigger than you think and that it is happening in your neighbourhood. What we need to be fully aware of is the safe adults around them, is that children will be showing in some way that things are not right. And we just have to learn how to read that. I think partly what drove me to release that hand signal was because I realised there's still too much talk and not enough equipping children with signals they can use. It's behaviour in a child that will always give it away. Also, a child that seems to want to wear a lot of clothes. Sometimes children layer up clothing to protect and mistakenly believing it will help protect them from anyone abusing them easily. A child who regresses may be one who goes back to sucking a thumb. A child who regresses may be one who just wants to cling on to mum. I'm actually writing a book at the moment which is due to be published called Keeping Kids Safe, a roadmap for parents, teachers and others, and it's these sort of things that I'll be detailing because parents are confused or stuck or don't know what to do, and they don't know what to do if they see that hand signal. I guess I've had to forgive them. I forgive them and have forgiven them so that I can move on in my life and I'm not weighed down by their evil. It took me a long time. By the way, that doesn't mean it's right if you forgive and wrong if you don't. For survivors everywhere, if you feel you want to forgive, go nuts. If you feel you don't want to forgive, go nuts. You will know when the time is right, if it ever is. I set up a YouTube channel called Handing the Shame Back 18 months ago, and on that channel, it's dedicated 100% to the adult survivors of child abuse. Each week, I interview a survivor and talk to them about their lives, because any other survivor listening may learn some things or get some tips or be help feel they're not alone. And I set up our foundation called Handing the Shame Back, because that's what survivors do when we speak. On that, I provide resources, so blogs that would interest survivors, tips for survivors. Each week I release a tip, and then tips for supporting survivors, panel discussions, all sorts of goodies on there. I do it because survivors live in the shadows and they need to be honoured and loved and appreciated for everything because they're beautiful human beings. So this is my memoir, On Angel's Wings, My Flight from Trauma to Grace, which details those 16 years. That memoir took me a lot of years to write, and that is available in all versions on gloriamasters.com and on Amazon, all versions, including Audible. Then the second book is Flight Path to Healing, and this is a guide for adult survivors of child abuse. And so it's a working book, and what that means is you can open it to any page and you can find a chapter that you want to work on, and it's got exercises that the reader can do. It's dedicated to you to work your way through your own trauma. And then I end each chapter with a mantra. These images, thick glossy cardboard, and they're perforated. They can be taken, removed from the book. People seem to love those. And yes, so and then I look at healing modalities like yoga and breath work and Reiki and just a few little bits about that, and discuss a section in the book is around what us as survivors experience. We experience a lot, but I've narrowed it down to probably 8 to 9 different aspects of child abuse trauma. Things like shame, triggers, self doubt, dissociation, hypervigilance. In there, there's a little flight path, travel destination, and including your itinerary, which encapsulates some of what I've explained earlier in the book. So people are actually designing their own flight path. I've given every survivor a boarding pass because to me, you survive child abuse, you're automatically on the plane. And then we end with, people love this, a child abuse survivor degree, which is your passport. And may I read this to you? This passport entitles the traveller to live the rest of their life in peace and harmony. This cannot be refunded, returned, or exchanged. The bearer has waited a lifetime for this trip. And again, they can remove it out of the book and put it up on a mirror or a mantle. So I'm very proud of that. And again, in all versions on gloriamasters.com and Amazon. The third book is due for release in October. What I realised was if I'd had something I could use, I used to be a teacher and I used to be a therapist, I could use that would help, my life might have been saved. So I decided to come up with a hand signal for children. And this is it. This signal began in 2021 and it was started by a group in Northern America, women who were being domestically abused. So when I created a new signal, a friend reached out and said, actually, just be aware that signal had been not only used by women who are in domestic violence situations, but also is now being taught to schools to show they're not safe, they're being abused. So I thought, I'm not going to recreate the wheel, I'm going to use that. It really should be everywhere across the world and used. Just a tool for kids. You are a beautiful gift. You'll be okay. You're here to help the world deal with this.